Welcome to the next episode of the ABCs of ERP and Beyond. This time we'll be discussing the crucial moments in any ERP implementation project, the cut-off and go-live stages. These are the moments when the system transitions from the old to the new and when the rubber hits the road in terms of system functionality and user adoption. It's a make or break moment for any project, and there are a lot of things that can go wrong if not handled correctly. So across the next 2 episodes, we're going to be exploring some of the do's and don'ts for these critical stages. And as ever, I'm joined by my fellow co-host, Nirav.shah. Welcome back.
Hey, Peter. Happy to be here and excited for this topic. You know, it's a very important one. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah, it's a good one because we've spoken about this slightly before, haven't we? About go live, and we keep saying it's really, really important,
Yeah,
and not actually discussed some of the do's and don'ts. So that's really going to be interesting in part 2 there. But part 1 is also just as critical, isn't it? This cutover
for sure.
stage.
For sure. Absolutely. It requires a lot. This is the third event, right? You remember we are talking about events when we started the
Mm.
series. We talked about the kickoff, and then we talked about the pilot, the UAT, the pilot test, which is another event. And here's another important you know, impasse in the project is we're ready to start using the ERP implementation. There's some people in the organization that are chomping at the bit because they know how much better it's going to make their job responsibility and their day-to-day workload. And there's other people that are super scared, right? And nervous. And, it's a big change management thing going on. And how do you battle that, right? And then you want to make sure, as the steering committee or the project sponsor, that it goes off without a hitch. That there's no issue, that we haven't left any rock unturned, right? We've
Mm.
thought about every possible situation and we've confirmed that it's all going to work for us. We have our reports, ready to go. So this is
Mm.
that critical moment where the decision is made saying the system has passed all major validation points from our process, from our data, from our users, right? Perspective
Mm.
is passed all those different checks. And let's execute now a plan to, remove the old system, in replacement, put in this new system. So when everybody, begins working on a specific day, it's going to be only in the new system. So this is a very
Mm.
important milestone and what I call, one of the final events of a full, deployment
Mm.
an ERP project. So can't stress the importance enough of making sure that that it's properly thought out.
Mm. Okay, so in terms of the cutoff, then we would need a plan, I guess, some kind of checklist, or is that how you'd work?
Exactly. So let's kind of think about what are we talking about? We say cut off, cut over, right? We're gonna, what are we gonna do? What does that mean? What that means is you're at some point gonna cut off your current system, but we want to be able to cut it off and extrapolate all the data we need out of there properly, right?
Yeah.
And then put it into the new system.
Okay.
But there's not only just looking at that data, but looking at other, stakeholders in this process. So it's important to create a cutover plan, right? This cutover plan should be very detailed down to, specific users, resources that could be internal or external. In our company at EdSurge CRP, we, make sure that we identify if there's any tasks that we have to complete as part of the cutover process, that we know, what that task is, what date we need to get that done by, right? And if
Hmm.
there's any issues or challenges that we need to, or constraints we need to take into account before completing that. I mean, it's a very, very detailed plan that starts the process of you cutting over to a cutover weekend. So this
Mm.
could be 2 weeks before you go live. It could be 3 weeks before you go live, before you start it. But essentially, it's this detailed plan that's going to give everybody a task that needs to have a task, of what to
Yeah.
complete, when to complete it by, so we could stay on track, successfully cut over and deploy and start our go live support, over once the cutover is complete. So, part of some things that are included in a cutover plan, right? You need to take into account external factors like, do we need to plan for user holidays? We can't just assume everyone is going to be available because they might not.
Yeah.
Right? There's people have taken vacation, they've already pre-committed to things. Maybe there's a conference going on, right, that week. Well, that's probably not a good time to cut over and go live if you have a big conference or a trade show, right? Um, are people still cleaning up the data, right? Is there some data cleanup that needs to happen?
Mm.
Um, has the legacy data been reviewed, right? And this is an important one because data structures between software, between ERP systems, right? It could be different,
Mm.
right? There was actually something I responded on LinkedIn this past week. We had I was responding to a good friend of mine. His name's Sam Gupta on LinkedIn, and he
Yeah.
he mentioned something about how you can have two different systems and two different table structures, and how do you manage that, right? So for Business Central, for example, one of the solutions that we resell, Business Central keeps purchase orders open even if they've been fully invoiced and received. And the reason why that is because it allows you, if you ever get a return on that original receipt, you have to return back to a vendor. We could add a line back to the same PO number that the vendor already has to receive that item in as a replacement. Whereas
Hmm.
some other systems, they may automatically delete the PO,
Yeah.
right? If it's fully invoiced and received. So we need to understand that data structure. Why are certain systems behaving the way they do, right? So that will help us how to structure that data and bring that into the new ERP system. Because
Mm.
eventually you got to map purchase orders, sales orders, invoices, AP or AR, right? You map all that open activity to your ERP system, so you could bring that over and have that as part of your cutover, so you can start transacting with those records when you go live. Because you can't leave
Hmm.
them behind, obviously, right? Because you want to keep everything in the new system. So that's
Yeah.
part of the plan as well. The cutover plan is to make sure that you've taken a really thorough look at your data between your legacy system and your current system and how that matches. Because if there's mismatches there, right, there may have to be like some extra files that need to be created. You got to merge a couple files together to create one file to import the data. Or is there opportunities to create APIs directly from linking to the legacy system that pushes data right into the new system, which is also possible. But you need to have that as part of a task in your cutover project plan, so that does not get ignored, and
Yeah.
you get the right people looking at the data, to make sure it's going to come over as we expect it to, and not assume it's going to come over correctly, because there could become that could have a lot of hiccups and
Mm.
negative. You could have negative, you know, type of create negative situations from a cutover perspective, because that could take so much more time than you anticipate if it's not reviewed
Mm.
up front.
Yeah. What else do we need to plan for? Other resources involved here?
Yeah, it's just not. Sometimes, I look at this. It's just not the partner and the consultant. It's end users, right? Who needs to do what, right? We might need the finance person on the customer team to be available to run AR reports or AP reports, on a Sunday, because that's when we get all the records in. We might
Yeah.
need the sales team to be available on a Saturday, for example, to put in open sales orders, because if you're only looking at 200 sales orders to put in, it doesn't make sense maybe to create an API, or a import file for that. Maybe it might just be easier just to hand enter that. Maybe the data is not trustworthy in the legacy system. That makes sense that you want to hand enter some of that
Yeah.
information. Well, then you need to have the right resources available and plan for that weekend, right? And by the way, I always recommend that a cutover is done over a weekend, not during the
Okay.
weekdays at all,
Right.
because you're not transacting. It's not a moving target, right? You want to make sure, excuse me, that this is a static, frozen time in the
Hmm.
system that you could take a clean set of data and move that over to the new system, so it's not like a moving target. Um, are there any third-party apps that you're going to be using in the new system? Maybe a special shipping integration that you're doing, or a special EDI integration. Well, have we informed that third-party app so they're available to make sure that the system is set up from a third-party app perspective, right? That
Yeah.
data that we're moving from the legacy system is coming over correctly to the new system. So there's a lot of different stakeholders in this process that need to ensure that they're available, that they're
Mm.
planned for accurately, so you could have a successful cutover, because this is not just a one-man show. This is not a one-sided show. It's not for just the partner to do. Everyone has to have all hands on deck to ensure a successful cutover.
Okay. Very interesting stuff. Point number two, then, create a go live company. So, what's the point of this?
Yeah, so when you create the plan and it's approved by all your, key users, right? The proper stakeholders in the company. It's, you've defined it down to the detail of, locking people out from the general ledger, and when to unlock them to come back into the system. With that point, you want to start the process of creating your production company. And this is a company that you're going to start preparing all that legacy data coming over into the live company. But this is the company
Right.
that you're going to use when you go live. Everyone's going to log into that and start transacting. That's going to be
Okay.
your production company in perpetuity with this, with the new ERP system,
Hmm.
essentially. So you want to create that as early as possible. So you're going to start setting it up, make sure some of the setups from your testing environments come over correctly, or you need to reset some things up, right? You want to ensure all third party ISVs and apps have been installed in the production environment, okay? And they're set up correctly, right? A lot of
Hmm.
times they get installed, but they forget to get set up, and now all of a sudden you're sitting there at go live saying, how come I can't use it? Because you're really not testing anything in the Go Live company until you actually start transacting, right? So you
Yeah.
need to make sure that's done correctly.
Okay.
You want to make sure that the static data is correct. And what I mean by that is your usual suspects: customer, vendors, items, item unit of measures, chart of accounts, resources, not stocks, right? Other base and master setup tables, that they're all correct and accurate based on the way you have completed your pilot or UAT testing,
Yeah.
and that approval, right? Just you initially you may get a blank company, or you could copy, your pilot company over into a new production company and bring a lot of this information over. But it's worth, checking that one last time. Okay, I have
Mm.
a funny story here, actually. We recently took a customer live on Acumatica, and their whole system was ready to go. They had, everything they needed, but what they didn't check is their item unit of measures. They just assumed it was correct, right? And what we realized is that the item unit measures were never really tested. The customer never really tested it, even though we tested a few, kind of handful of items during pilot testing. But you can imagine you're testing 5 items out of maybe 20,000 SKUs,
Mm.
right, in the system. So when we bring over their on-hand inventory went in with the wrong unit of measures. So essentially, it was the wrong quantities.
Yeah.
So now, instead of having 5 boxes of something, they have 50,000 each. And that's not how they
Perfect.
inventory, right? Uh, Realize this during a Saturday, during cutover. Obviously, we're going to help the customer get through this hurdle. We reformatted some Excel files for them. We kind of looked at what their legacy system had and how it was set up, and then did some, programming magic around behind the scenes for us, and got everything, straightened out before go live. But it's one of those things. Look at the data
Mm.
before you decide. Assume that, yeah, whatever came over from pilot is going to be accurate, right? And it's all there. Sometimes it's not, right? Here's a case in point. A lot of times, right, during the ERP implementation, you're going to have you're still running a business whilst trying to implement
Yeah.
your new business management solution. So you're still onboarding new customers, you're still putting in new items, you're putting in, new vendors. Well, that pilot data maybe it's just a snapshot of when you started the implementation, and that was never refreshed. So
Mm.
you may have a slew of new customers and vendors and items that never got put in to the pilot company. And if you convert that into your production company, you're going to miss all these new customers that you created.
Yeah.
So it's accurate to do one more cross check and validation. Hey, do we have all our customers, items, vendors, right? All these other different data elements I talked about into your production
Mm.
company because you're going to need those. So it's important to ensure all your production company data is accurate and on point, so you could go ahead and start transacting with that information.
Mm. Okay, so that links into number three here, I guess. So we're talking about the amount of data that needs to come over. So what can we do to maybe minimize this amount of like open live data? What can we do here?
Yeah, it's a very very good point as well. Is you know, face it, right? It's every company's going to have just a ton of data, right? They're maybe transitioning from a system that they've been using for 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. You can imagine how much information is in that database, right? But you
Yeah.
kind of have to have a clear line in the sand, say, okay, what we're going to bring over and what we're not going to bring over, right? And there might be opportunities to now clean some of that data. You might have open aging, over 120 days. Well, you may know if it's 100 over 120 days, we may not collect on that anymore. Let's write it off, or let's go and chase these customers. Let's get the cash in, so we could close this open AR. There's no reason to bring that into the new system. Maybe you have AP, open AP out there saying that, yeah, we have some of this sitting out there. We could pay off half of it, so that minimizes the number of open AP records that we have to bring into the new system. Open sales orders. There might be some sales orders that we was sitting on. You just got inventory, so let's go and push that out. So we don't have to bring in a ton of new open sales orders into the system. So it's making that judgment call, saying how much of this data could we clean up before we
Hmm.
go live, right? So
Yeah.
what I always say is the more you can clean up before you go live, the easier that cutover is going to be. The less data you might have to manually put in, the less data you have to map over and import into the new system, right? It just makes it smoother from that standpoint, and then also make decisions such as how much which historical data do you want to bring in? We're of the opinion that historical data, especially from a subledger perspective, closed sales orders, closed quotes, closed purchase quotes, closed blanket order, all that stuff, you really don't need that in the new system. Keep that in your old system. Hook it up into a Power BI report, or hook it up into run some custom reports around that thing, so you could get access to the database and run reports. But in your new ERP system now, this new shiny new thing that you said, we're gonna start driving this thing around on what's that highway, the Pacific Trail 1, or the US 1 highway in California.
Mm.
Get these nice views. You're in this nice ERP system.
Yeah.
It's they just start fresh, right? And there's some justification to bring over some of that historical data. That's fine. Sometimes it's common at some point, but we recommend at least let's try hard not to bring some of that over to create any customizations around that. How we're going to balance, bring over our general ledger, right? How many years back do we want to go in terms of balances for our GL to run comparative P&L and balance sheet type statements? So, all those decisions are going to have to be made during this phase, is, making sure that we're bringing the right level of data over. So when people come over, come to work Monday morning, it's basically a snapshot. They pick up where they left off. They know the
Yeah.
orders they put in. They know the orders that they're following up on. They know what they have to do next. And there's no questions about that.
Okay, I want to jam in number four here.
Mhm.
Just linking back to what you said, it sounds like there's a few different options for getting this data into the new system, and
Yep.
maybe it's a blend of different. Maybe it's a different um, part of the system, and it's easier to do it a different way. So, what options have we got? We sound like we could use API. We can do a manual process. So, what goes into the decisions on this, and what are the options we have?
Yeah, generally speaking, when you're talking about like OpenAR, OpenAP, on-hand inventory, um, GL balances, those generally could be imported in, because all you're doing is putting in the header records, right? You really
Yeah.
you don't really need the lines, the detail lines for those type of records itself. So that's pretty
Mm.
simple and straightforward to import. You start running into problems where you need the detail. So, for example, sales orders, right? You could have in your legacy system, you could have a sales order that's 50 lines, but out of the 50 lines, you shipped out 10, right? Completely, and you've invoiced the 10. So you really have 40 lines open on the sales order, but it's an open sales order, sales order nonetheless. So
Mm.
in that situation, you need to manually put that in. What I would recommend is because, instead of having to extract out only the lines that you have remaining, right? It's easier to do it manually at that point, right? Along with that, right? What if there's partial lines? What if there's a sales order line that, out of 10 pieces, you already shipped five and invoice five? Well, you need to really just bring over the open five on that
Yeah.
sales order line. So it all depends on the detail and what you have there. That's why I always say it's always a
Mhm.
good call to scrub that data and understand how much is it better to bring manual over versus import. Generally, anything that's detail related at the line level, I say do manually. Versus import is when you're just doing more header level records that doesn't require the detail to come over.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. There's one crucial department, I guess, in the entire process of an ERP implementation, and that's the financial side of things. So, I guess there's some kind of financial approval process involved in this cutover stage.
Yeah, exactly. And this was probably, the most important step at the cutover is to get the customer's blessings. Okay. And, oftentimes when we do our cutovers, we tell our customers in advance, whoever the controller is, the vice president of finance, right? Even maybe the CEO, we're going to need their final approval when everything is in the system and the system is now ready to be switched basically on, meaning we would
Yeah.
activate the general ledger postings, we'll start letting everybody in the system and start transacting from that specific go live date, right? So what we call that is a financial cutover approval. And that
Right.
is reconciling the open AR report to the accounts receivable GL balance. Does it match, right? Same thing with the AP. Your aged accounts payable report, does that match with your accounts payable GL balance? On hand inventory, same thing. Run our valuation report. Does that match our GL balance?
Hmm.
Sub ledger to the actual balances. Does it all match from all the different control accounts that the system uses to maintain data integrity from a subledger and financial posting perspective? So that we request and we almost require that there's that final check from the customer saying, "Yep, check, check, check. Everything matches the subledger between the financial balances, and we're ready to go live."
Very nice. Um, I think we should flip it. So with every good do, there's just as many don'ts. So let's talk about some of the don'ts or the things to avoid then during the cutover phase. Number one, I've got written down here is not having the emphasis on having this proper cutover plan. So we've said this before, and I think we have actually got a cutover plan, or at least a checklist that we want to share with the community. So um, find out later on, and we'll tell you about how to get one of those. But what is this pitfall that we want to avoid here on this cutover plan?
It's assuming that as soon as you're done with your pilot, you're ready to go live. You're not. You're really not. You need to have a plan in place, and it should always be probably one of the most detailed plans you have throughout this whole ERP project. Yeah, you're gonna have an
Right.
ERP project plan. You're gonna have a pilot plan. This plan is like what I get life and death. Not to that extreme, but this is very important, right, to the success of a deployment. You've done all this work, you don't want to miss anything, essentially.
Yeah.
So, not having the right emphasis on this plan, or having the right sense of detail to this plan, I would say don't do that, because if you miss something, it turns out to be a critical point. Someone's not scheduled to be in the office that week, and they're central to this process, or the ISV has told you that they're going to be on vacation and there's no one going to be supporting this. you know don't do that. Have a plan in place and know what everyone should be doing, when they should be completing their tasks. Get confirmation so you can ensure a successful deployment.
Mm. Okay, I want to jam in another don't here, I guess. Saying about the potential complexity and definitely the importance of this stage is to avoid doing this in a busy period.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. Try to cut over and go live, right? That obviously depends on how big the company is and, what does a busy period mean for them, right? So on and so forth, what industry that they're in. But typically speaking, right, if it's your busy period, try to avoid a go live that period, right? Because it's just with everything else that's going on that time, it will just ease the nerves of everybody. It will make your transition smoother, right? Without having people running around with like, high stress, and to meet critical dates and things. That's just a recommendation from my side. Now I know we've taken customers live on a busy period and it's been fine. There's a lot of factors that go behind that particular decision, but generally speaking, if you can avoid going live on a busy period, avoid it if you can.
Okay, yeah, and it goes without saying, like you said earlier, about this being kind of a weekend process because you haven't got as many people in the office. You're probably
Yeah,
not processing orders. You're not doing shipments. You're not,
right.
doing anything uh, that would get in the way of this cutover point. So I
Exactly.
guess
Yeah.
that's also perfect time to do it. Number three, contingency wise, then not having a rollback plan.
Yeah, I cringe a little bit when I hear rollback during cutover because really you shouldn't have one. You shouldn't really need to do one, but it's always necessary to have a documented plan just in case. Just in
Right.
case, right? In case everything were to go south and something happens where no one can get access to even the environment, right? Let's say
Mm,
right before you go live, you have an on-premise solution, which do people do on-premise still? Peter, I don't know.
I have one.
Uh, but yeah, let's say you can't. So you install a new shiny system. It's on premise. Your server gets hacked. Oh my goodness, right? Like, what's the fallback plan? Have a rollback plan on that. Revert back to your legacy system, or if you have another system that's set up as a backup, have that mirrored, replicated potentially. So in case you need to switch over to another server, you have that available. There's a lot of different methods out there, but just it's a one liner. Think about it, right? Think about the worst case scenario that could happen in your industry and just prepare for it. Don't have to probably
Mm,
put too much time into it, but at least it's in the back of your mind in case it does happen that you know how to react to it.
yeah. Okay. I would like to just say that our old system that we're currently on is on prem. I'm hoping
Okay.
we'll get a, a cloud one in the not too distant future. So. Okay, number four, not getting official pilot testing approval prior to the cutover weekend.
Yeah. So, yeah, everybody wants to go live. That's the ultimate goal, right? But if you haven't taken time to properly do a pilot test and get a proper approval, right, your go live is going to be rough. So, no matter how much work you do on the cutover, right,
Hmm.
you're just not going to be prepared for a go live. So,
Yeah.
it's important to get the proper approval during pilot testing. So, that gives you more, I would say, encouragement and awareness that the company is ready and stable to go live in the new system.
Mm. Okay. Number five, the last one I have, links into number one here, is not informing third party apps or ISVs about your cutover plans.
Yeah, totally. I mean, again, this is one of those no brainers. Is if your vendors don't know that you're going live, your third party vendors that apps that they bought, right? Third party solutions to help support their business process, they
Mm.
don't know you're going live. Maybe they don't have a production key for you, a production license ready to go, right? You
Mm.
might still be operating off a test, a demo license potentially,
Yeah.
right? There's some setups that they have to do that they are unaware that you've been going live,
Yeah.
that they'll even set up for you. So it's important to keep them in the loop, incorporate them in your cutover plan so they could be involved in the process to ensure a successful deployment. It's, we're all in this together. There's a lot of different people in this particular process. And the last thing you want to do is keep people out of it, right? The more awareness you could give to the right people, they're going to provide feedback, and be able to get you over this very critical event to go live, essentially, which would be Monday morning. So yeah, to keep them in the loop, have that as part of the project plan, and all will be well.
He says, with a smile on
He
his
said.
face, knowing that the real world isn't always like that.
It's not like that. It's not like that.
I think there's some key themes that we keep seeing in these is communication, good communication, proper planning, and I guess like not making assumptions are probably
Mhm.
the priorities here, I guess, across
Yeah.
all these do's and don'ts.
Absolutely, and I'm really excited, to share a sample project plan, a cutover project plan with our listeners, if they like, kind of review that, use that as a template, as your starting point for your cutover, and integrate it into your plans itself. But this is a really important topic. I'm glad that we're able to do it as part of this series, Peter. And we're open to questions or even suggestions if there's specific dues that we've missed. Add them to our link, add them to our chat, reach out to us. We'd love to add it in here. Keep talking about this, because there's these are what we consider best practices. Every industry does it a little differently. So if there's certain things in certain industries that we need to incorporate in here, we'll love that feedback. So hopefully this is informative for everybody.
Yeah, and if we got some plans that we can share with people, what's the best way they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, why don't you email me directly at nirav.shah at adcirruserp.com. So we'll also try to go ahead and put a link for that email address in some of the platforms where you're listening to this, and try to find it. And looking forward to that, feedback and sharing the plan with you.
Very good. So I guess this is part one. Then part two will be coming up in a couple of weeks' time. What have we got in a fortnight time? What are we talking about?
The go live. So we've done all this
Uh
cutover
oh.
stuff. We've done all this cutover stuff. We've got the blessings. We got the stamp of approval. We're going live. What happens next?
What a
Gotta wait and
cliffhanger to
see.
finish on. Just remember, watch, like, and subscribe, and you'll find out.
You'll find out exactly.
Good. Well, as ever, a pleasure. As always, nirav.shah. I will catch you
Yep.
on part two in a couple of weeks.
Perfect. Excellent, Peter. Thanks so much.
Cool.
Thanks everybody for listening.
Have a good one.